pretty first rate.
Yeah. They're teaching journalism these days, like a lot of people. But tell me, so you went to China you went to Chengdu in '86.
In 86.
You got to have a story from there.
It's a little bit of a story. I mean, there's multiple stories on that trip, but when I was in high school and college, working at the Dallas Morning News as an intern, there was uh, there was a guy named Ed Hill who was a staff photographer there, who kind of became my mentor. And so my last year of college, Ed had planned out that he had since moved to work at the Philadelphia Inquirer. So I hadn't really talked to him or really seen him much in a couple of years, but we stayed in touch somewhat. Anyway, Ed planned out this trip. He was really interested in Buddhism, and he wanted to go to Dharamsala and see the Dalai Lama. And so, but he wanted to do all these other things in Asia. And so we were talking on the phone one day. He basically invited me to go with him, and I had I took a semester off of college. I blocked out 6 weeks to do that trip, and we started out. We went to India, we went to Thailand, Nepal, and at that time, Tibet had basically just kind of opened up to Western tourists. And so, in order to get to Lhasa, you had to go. I mean, there might have been a way to get there through. It probably was through China, but because we were in Kathmandu, we hired a car, and it took us a few days really to go over the mountains, and get into Lhasa. But it was an absolutely mind-boggling experience. You can imagine. I was 21 years old. I was, had grown up in Texas, and suddenly, you're in the middle of this really, to by anyone's eyes, such an exotic and interesting culture. And so Ed and I actually sort of we got tired of each other after a few weeks, and we sort of went our separate ways in Lhasa. But then I met these two Chinese guys who helped me get out of Lhasa by airplane, and we had a layover in Chengdu that went, supposed to be one day, and then it ended up being like 6 days.
Okay.
So that was my first exposure. But in those years, and even looking back at the pictures now, I'm amazed that, like everybody was riding bicycles. I mean, you saw some cars, but it's like, for the most part, everybody's just on bikes. So it looked like what your idea of China would have been in the 1960s or something.
Yeah.
And then, I went back, not quite 15 years later, and a lot had changed. It was just really starting to turn.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Wow, we could do a whole session
We could.
just on China.
Yes, we could.
So, so growing up in Texas, you took an interest in photography. You had some great mentors, which is always helpful, always useful.